first story, she watches me, even here. It started about 3 weeks ago, though I didn't realize it until maybe the fifth day. My name's Brian Alden. I live in a small 2-bedroom house in Yakima, Washington. Nothing too special, just a quiet street, a couple of dogs barking at all hours, kids on scooters, the usual neighborhood stuff. I work from home, editing insurance forms, so I don't get out much. My life used to be quiet, predictable, boring even. Not anymore. It began with a glance, just that. I saw her across the street, behind the tall hedge that separates old Mrs. Kepler's yard from the sidewalk. She was wearing this long, tattered gray coat like the kind you'd see in some old war photo. Her hair was black and wet-looking, tangled and clumped against her pale face. She didn't move, just stood there, watching. At first, I thought maybe she was just lost or mentally unwell, but then she was there again the next night, and the next. Always in the same place, always watching. The fifth night was when I called the police. They came out, did a slow drive-by, but of course, she was gone. I felt like a fool. But the next night, she was closer. She stood directly in front of my mailbox. I turned all the lights on. I grabbed a bat and stood at the window for hours. She never moved, never blinked. But when the sun came up, she was gone. No footprints in the dirt, no sign anyone had ever been there. That's when the dreams started. They were never full-on nightmares, not at first. Just dreams of being watched, standing in line at the grocery store and seeing her face between the cereal boxes, glancing out the window during a Zoom call and spotting her in the background. Always watching, never moving. Last week, I found her inside. I was brushing my teeth late at night when I saw something in the mirror. Not in the room, just in the reflection, behind the shower curtain. The curtain wasn't moving, but I could see her, standing there, watching me through the plastic. I spun around, pulled the curtain back, nothing. No. But I swear on my mother's grave, there was an indent in the bath mat. That same night, I checked the Ring camera footage. She was never there, not once, even when I saw her with my own eyes. But I noticed something else. Every night at exactly 2:17 in the morning, the feed glitches for exactly 11 seconds. It's always the same. 2:17, 11 seconds. I don't sleep anymore. 3 nights ago, I drove out of town, just packed a bag and left. Slept in my car the first night, in the parking lot of a Walmart near Spokane. I felt safe. No sign of her. Second night, I got a cheap motel off the highway. Room smelled like bleach and mildew. I left the lights on, the curtains open. Woke up at 2:28, drenched in sweat. There was a smudge on the inside of the window, like a face, pressed against the glass. Last night, I went back home. I don't even know why. I just thought, maybe if I confronted it, her, maybe it would end. The house was cold, dead quiet. I walked through each room with my phone light, holding a kitchen knife. Nothing, no sign of her. But the moment I stepped into the bedroom, the lights went out, all at once. I heard breathing, deep, rattling, right behind me. I turned, she was there, closer than ever. Her eyes weren't eyes, just black holes. Not metaphorically, actual blackness. Like she had no face at all, just an outline where her head should have been. I screamed and ran out the front door barefoot. Didn't stop until I hit the gas station 2 blocks down. The cashier called the cops. Again, they searched. Nothing. Again. I showed them the camera footage. Again, that 11-second gap. This morning, I woke up in my car again, parked in a rest stop outside Ellensburg, and she was there. Right outside the driver's side window. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I stared at her. She stared back. Then she smiled. It was the first time she's ever done that. And I knew it was over. Not because she was going to kill me, but because she didn't need to. I'm never alone again. She's with me now. Even here, even while I'm writing this, I can feel her breath on the back of my neck. She's watching. Second story, the eyes that never blinked. I never thought someone could be watched so closely and not realize it until it was far too late. It started a few weeks after I moved to Asheville, a sleepy little town nestled deep in the hills of northern Oregon. I just landed a job at the county library, a peaceful place where most of my coworkers were old enough to be my grandparents. For a guy like me, 29, single, not exactly a people person, it was perfect. Or so I thought. My house sat on the edge of town, past the old rail line, right where the streetlights ended and the trees pressed in too close. A small two-bedroom with creaky floors and a back porch that faced nothing but endless pine. The quiet was something I'd craved living in Portland all those years. But after the first week, the silence started to feel wrong. It began with the feeling. That weight, that presence. You know the one. You're alone, but your skin starts to prickle like you're not. I shrugged it off, told myself I was just adjusting to the country air. But then I noticed the lights. Just past midnight, every few nights, a faint flicker would flash through the trees. I assumed it was a hunter or a camper, but who camps behind a house? On private land? In the dead of winter? One night, I stayed up, sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, coffee shaking in my hand. I saw it again. Not a flashlight, not a fire. It was a glow, pale, white, wrong. I called out into the dark. "Hello? You're on private property." But there was no answer, only the crunch of something large moving back into the woods. That night, I locked every door and window and barely slept. A few days later, I came home from work and found a trail of footprints leading up to my back door. Long, dragging steps, no return prints, no animal tracks, and the back door, still locked. No signs of entry. I went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Denton was a big guy in his 60s with a long memory and a deep frown. When I told him what was happening, he just looked at me and said, "You live near Old Gorman's Stretch. Strange things up there. Don't go looking." That wasn't helpful. So I bought cameras. I rigged 2 motion-activated ones facing the backyard. The next night, I sat watching the live feed on my laptop. At 2:21 a.m., one of the cameras picked up motion. A figure. Standing at the edge of the trees, I froze. It wasn't a man, or maybe it was. Tall, still, wearing something like a long dress or cloak, pale skin, no visible face, just dark holes where eyes should be. Then the figure looked up, directly into the camera, and smiled. The feed cut to static. I ran outside with a bat, screaming like a lunatic into the woods, but there was nothing, only the wind. The next morning, the cameras were gone, ripped clean off the siding, wires and all. No footage, no evidence. That's when I stopped sleeping. I started seeing her, the thing in other places, at the library, out my window at work, reflected in the glass of the break room fridge, always still, always far, always watching. I tried to leave, packed a bag, booked a motel in Eugene, drove off just after dawn. But as I pulled onto the highway, my check engine light came on. Then the engine just died. I got out and started walking. That's when I saw the car, parked on the shoulder a few yards behind mine. I hadn't passed it before. Inside, she was sitting in the driver's seat. Same pale skin, same black pits for eyes, just smiling. I ran. When I finally got cell service, I called a tow truck. Told the driver to take me anywhere, just not back to Asheville. He looked at me funny but agreed. That night, I stayed in a motel an hour out. She was there too. I opened the curtains. She was standing under the street lamp across the lot, still watching. I shut the blinds, didn't sleep. The next morning, I found a note slipped under the door. "You see me now." I burned it. Packed again, tried flying, Seattle to Denver to Boston, didn't matter. She followed, in airport crowds, reflected in windows on security footage. I can't escape her. I'm writing this from a rented cabin in the middle of Montana. No Wi-Fi, no phone, no mirrors, no glass. I thought maybe isolation would help. But tonight, there was a knock. I didn't answer. Then came another and another. Knock, 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 slow, measured, like she was counting. I stayed quiet. Then the voice, not loud, not angry, soft, like someone whispering through a dream. "You see me now, and I see you too." I opened the door, and now you see her too. Third story. She watches me from the pines. It began with the silence. I had just moved into my uncle's old cabin deep in the pine woods outside of Ellensburg, Washington. He passed away the previous winter, and since I was the only relative not tied down with work or family, I was the one to inherit it. I needed a break from the city, so I packed up what little I owned and made the move. The place was remote. The nearest neighbor was nearly 2 miles down a gravel road that had seen better decades. Cell reception? Spotty at best. But I liked the idea of being alone. At least I thought I did. My first few days were uneventful. I chopped wood, unpacked boxes, and cleaned out the dust and mildew that had settled in after years of neglect. The air was crisp, the nights were cold, and the forest was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds kept their distance. Then I noticed her. The first time, I saw her standing between the trees around dusk. A woman, long black hair, pale skin. Her eyes looked darker than night, almost hollow. She wasn't moving, just watching me from the tree line. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but when I blinked, she was gone. That night, I locked the doors, all of them. I even blocked the chimney. Something about her stare. It wasn't just eerie, it was invasive, like she could see into me. Over the next few days, I kept spotting her, always between the trees, always watching. She never came closer than maybe 50 yards, but she never left either. She'd vanish for hours, then reappear. Sometimes I'd see her reflection in the window at night. Sometimes I'd hear soft crunching footsteps just beyond the porch. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe I was just jumpy. Maybe I was alone too long. But then I started finding things moved inside the house. A chair tipped over. My toothbrush wet, even when I hadn't used it. The back door unlocked, even though I swore I secured it. One morning, I found pine needles scattered on the living room floor. I don't have pine trees that close to the cabin. That was the day I nailed all the windows shut. Still, she came. Every night, just standing, always in the same spot at first. But then, closer. By the end of the second week, she was within 20 feet. I stopped sleeping. I sat on the floor with a shotgun across my lap, eyes fixed to the tree line. Nothing helped. Nothing changed. I called the sheriff's office in town, but no one came. They thought I was pranking them. I swear to God, I muttered one night, if you come closer, I'll shoot. She tilted her head, smiled. I fired. The blast echoed across the valley like thunder, but she didn't flinch. The next morning, there was no shell on the ground. The shotgun was unloaded. I didn't do that. I know I didn't do that. I decided I had to leave. I threw everything into the truck. Didn't care what I forgot. I wasn't spending another night there. But the engine wouldn't start. Battery drained. Cables looked like they had been chewed through. No animals around for miles. That night, I boarded up the house, nailed planks across the doors, covered every window. Still, I heard her, tapping, scratching, whispers. Let me in, I screamed into the night. Fired every round I had left through the walls, through the windows. Silence, then laughter. Not loud, but right behind me. I turned, nothing. The clock had stopped ticking. I ripped it off the wall. The hands were moving backward. No power, but the lights flickered. Then she was inside. Not through a door, not through a window. She stepped out of the hallway, the one that led to the basement. I never went into that basement. I didn't even have the key. But she had it. Leave, I said. She smiled again. I already have. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't in the cabin. I was in the forest, naked, bleeding, surrounded by pines and others like her. They watched, not just her, all of them watching me, waiting. And when I tried to scream, my mouth was gone. Just skin, just silence. Now I stand between the trees. And I watch too. Fourth story, she watches me from everywhere. It began on a Sunday evening in late September, just as the sun dipped below the pines in northern Idaho. I was living alone in a rented cabin about 10 miles outside of Sandpoint, surrounded by forest, silence, and too much time. That particular night, something felt off. It wasn't just the cold creeping in early or the smell of decaying leaves. It was the stillness. The kind that seeps into your bones and whispers something isn't right. I had moved there to disconnect. No internet, no neighbors, just my old books and the crackling fireplace. That first week, I felt peace like I hadn't known in years. But the peace didn't last. By the second week, I noticed small things. Objects out of place. Footprints in the mud that didn't match mine. A feeling of being watched, especially at night. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, cabin fever, maybe even raccoons. But then came the woman. The first time I saw her, she was standing behind the tree line, barely visible, wearing a long, dark coat. Her hair was black, matted, hanging low over her face. I couldn't make out her features, but I knew she was looking at me. She didn't move, she didn't wave, she just watched. I blinked, and she was gone. I tried to convince myself it was a shadow, a trick of the twilight, but the next night, she was closer. Not behind the trees anymore. Standing near the edge of the front yard, motionless. "Hey!" I yelled. She didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't move. I grabbed a flashlight, ran outside, but there was no one there. No footprints, no broken twigs, nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I started locking all the doors and windows, even though I was 10 miles from the nearest human being. I kept my shotgun loaded beside the bed. Every time I turned off the lights, I imagined her standing just outside the window, breathing, waiting. One night I left the porch light on. I thought maybe it would scare her away. It didn't. She got closer. I woke up at 3 in the morning to a scratching sound on the glass. Not loud, not frantic, just slow, deliberate. I sat up, heart hammering, and turned my head toward the window. She was there, right outside, her face pressed against the glass, eyes wide, lips cracked, skin gray and stretched too tight. I screamed and fell out of bed, reaching for the shotgun, but by the time I aimed, she was gone. The next day, I drove into town. I told the sheriff. He gave me a look like I was crazy, but agreed to check things out. When we got back to the cabin, there was nothing. No sign anyone had been there. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. "Maybe you've been alone too long," he said. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept every light in the cabin on. I watched the windows. I waited. 3 hours before dawn, I heard footsteps on the porch. I held my breath. Creak! The floorboard groaned. I raised the shotgun. Silence. Then a knock. Just one. Then again. And again. I screamed, "Get out of here!" No answer. The doorknob started to rattle. I pulled the trigger. The blast lit up the cabin, but when the smoke cleared, the door was untouched. No damage, no blood, no body. I ran, didn't even lock the door behind me. I stayed in a motel that night, tried to call my brother in Spokane, but the line was dead. My phone wouldn't work either. No signal, no service. The next day I went back. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself I wasn't going insane. The cabin was just how I left it. Except for one thing. On the mirror in the bathroom, written in long, jagged scratches, "She watches me from everywhere I moved out that same hour." I've lived in 3 different states since then. New Mexico, Georgia, Michigan, and every place I go, I see her. Sometimes in reflections, sometimes in the corner of a dark alley, sometimes just watching from the crowd. I don't know who she is. I don't know what she wants, but every time I think I'm free, she shows up. She doesn't age, she never speaks, and she never stops watching. If you're reading this, you might see her too now. She's watching you. She always watches. And once you see her, you can't unsee her. You can't escape her. She watches me from everywhere. 5th story. The Eyes Behind Maple Hollow. It all began in the dead stillness of late October. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your breath look like smoke. I had just moved to Maple Hollow, a quiet little town tucked between the Appalachian foothills and an endless forest that looked like it hadn't been touched in 100 years. People said it was peaceful, safe, a good place to start over. I rented a 2-story farmhouse on the outskirts, surrounded by woods on 3 sides. There was a long gravel driveway that crunched under my boots, a wind chime on the porch that barely moved, and that eerie silence you only find when you're miles from traffic, sirens, and streetlights. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked, ate cold pizza, watched the shadows stretch across the ceiling, and fell asleep to the sound of wind in the trees. But by the second night, something felt off. At around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a tapping noise. Light, rhythmic, tap, tap. It was coming from the window beside my bed. I didn't look. I don't know why, but I froze, like some part of me already knew I shouldn't see what was there. The next morning, I blamed it on a tree branch, but there were no branches near that window. The third night, the tapping came again. This time, it was louder, and when I finally had the courage to peek through the curtain, my heart nearly exploded, because there, standing in the middle of my yard, was a woman. She was barefoot, pale, wearing a tattered white dress that fluttered in the wind. Her hair was soaked and matted across her face, and though I couldn't see her eyes, I knew she was looking right at me. I blinked. She was gone. The cops came and left, said it was probably a prank. Kids, drunk locals. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I installed motion lights and a camera out front. The footage caught nothing, just wind, trees, nothing. But the tapping kept happening, and every night she got closer. By the 5th night, she was at the porch. She never knocked, never tried the door, just stood there, staring, breathing, silent. I watched from the 2nd floor, heart slamming in my chest, the light casting her shadow long across the porch boards. I called the police again. They arrived in the morning. She was gone. "Maybe you're just tired," one of them said. "New place, big move. Stress plays tricks on the mind." But I knew I wasn't imagining her. She was real, and she was getting bolder. I stopped sleeping. I drank coffee until my hands shook. I kept all the lights on, but none of it mattered. Because the 7th night, I found muddy footprints inside the house. They started at the back door and ended at my bedroom. I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe I was too afraid. Maybe I was losing my mind. Instead, I sat in the kitchen with a baseball bat in my lap and watched the hallway like it was a hunting blind. Nothing happened. Until I blinked. She was right there, standing just past the threshold, face pale and hollow, eyes like pits of black water. And she smiled. I screamed, swung the bat, hit nothing. She vanished. I left that night, drove until the gas tank threatened empty, slept in a Walmart parking lot with the engine running and the lights on. But it wasn't over. The next day, I checked my phone. There was a video. It was from my front door camera. The date stamp said it was taken just before I left. In the video, the front door opens by itself, and she walks in, right into the house, like she belonged there. I deleted the footage, sold the house, left Maple Hollow behind, but she didn't leave me. Now every night at 3 a.m., no matter where I am, no matter how far I run, I hear tapping, tap, 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 and when I look out the window, she's always closer than the night before. She's watching, and one day soon, I know, she'll come inside.